Auzu billahi minash shaitan rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear brothers and sisters, welcome to our show at Sada Haq. I hope you guys are doing well. Today is the 16th of December. It's getting close to the New Year, so I hope you guys are all well prepared. Everybody is staying warm. I know the weather is really cold, per se. And to start off my talk for today's show, I just want to welcome everyone back to my show, and I just want to give you guys a little bit of a reflection of what I spoke about last week. It was about my Umrah trip when I went to Umrah and then coming back to the States. It was a 10-day trip. It was a very successful trip. It was a fun trip. It was an enjoyable trip. And what I had gotten from it is that, and what was very important for me and for us to share, and for myself to share with you, everybody that's watching my show today, is that if you're a young person who is a youth, for those parents, if you have children who are 16, age of 16 to 16 and over, if you're a young adult, in your 20s, I highly recommend, even in your 30s, to really go out and just do an Umrah trip. It's actually very nice. It's very nice. It's very fulfilling spiritually, emotionally, physically. It just turns your mindset very differently and in a healthy way possible. And again, it's a good opportunity for us to go and be close to our Creator, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and not just that, but then also be able to enjoy the trip. As I had mentioned earlier, when I was seeing families take their elderlies, or brothers and sisters that once they hit the ages over 65 and 70, what I had noticed was a lot of the family members were they were having a very difficult time in the process of doing Umrah. And that goes for Hajj too. Hajj is even more difficult, if not, at least 10 times difficult, because you have millions of people, in one location. Currently when I went there during Umrah time, it was much easier. When you're someone who's a lot older, it becomes very difficult, even not just for yourself, but it also becomes very difficult for the family member. So you have to take into consideration, if you are someone who is of an older age, please try to do your best to encourage the your children and your grandchildren. If you're somebody who's young, go when you're young. If you go once you're older, you're going to make yourself, it's going to be very difficult for you, first of all. And then not just that, but it becomes very difficult for your family members to take care of you. And it becomes a very challenging experience, and it could be an unpleasant experience. So for that, I highly recommend you guys to go, brothers and sisters. The second thing I wanted to discuss was that, just to do a self-reflection of last week's talk on weather and how that affects mental health. I broke down the four seasons, and what are the benefits of it, the beauty of having different seasons of the year, with weather. It either be the climate, it either be the agricultural growth of fruits, vegetables, and life, mechanisms that are created here in this world, and how that affects mental health. As we talked about it, there's people that actually don't get sunlight. Studies have shown that in Denmark, the suicide rate is very high, and this is due to no sun. And it varies. In America, usually at times of summer and spring, that's the highest rate of suicide once it gets very hot. There's a lot of energy coming into your body. You're consuming a lot of energy, and that triggers and that causes a lot of chemical imbalances in your body and in your mind, that causes an individual to go ahead and commit suicide. The research has not been there specifically to tell us why that is, but I will keep continuously to do my research to look at different articles and research data to see what is the actual reasoning behind it, and to say. Let's talk about, again, I had mentioned earlier, when it comes to helping us, dear brothers and sisters, we always come out and we ask, but I'll come again and ask again. It is because of you guys, that we're able to come out and provide, services in terms of, the deen, Islam, programs for the families, for the children, for myself to be able to come out and to work, and to share some form of knowledge so that can spread to help our families, in learning about what is mental health and behavioral health, and what is said, from a professional level, what should be done and what should families do, specifically those that are here in America. So again, I want to thank those friends and families who actually have supported us financially, and I encourage you again, please. You see the number on our screen. If you do find our shows helpful and beneficial, please, I encourage you constantly to keep, make your donations as you guys are, and not just that, but it can be a monthly payment of small money. It doesn't have to be a large portion, or it could be a one-time donation that can be given. We can give tax exemptions that can be given to you guys. So you have the number on the screen. Please you can make the call. It doesn't have to be now, but you can make it anytime. You can get that number and then call after the show and say, what, I want to make a donation. It can be for a specific program. It can be for a specific cause. And you can always tell us, what is it that you guys want us to do? That is really the main purpose of the show, is to really come out and discuss these matters with you folks. This is, first and foremost, Sada Haq is what is known as Voice of Justice. Is an Islamic channel. One of the twists that came to it was actually myself, as I came into the show and into this TV, was that when it was first being established, we came to an understanding that you cannot separate mental health, no matter what you do, is health, mental health, and mental, and health well-being from Islam. So the idea was that, a lot of us are, working outside in the community. What we came to realize is that a lot of Muslims are trying to, a lot of Muslims are asking questions that are, Islamic. And not just that, but they're having day-to-day life challenges that require, a behavioral health professional to come out and really help them set up a platform or set up a certain structure in their life that can help them better maneuver in an Islamic way or Islamic teachings. So the idea was that, we will be starting this program, this specific program, to come out and talk about mental health. And any topics or anything that I discuss will always have a mental health component to it. And that's included, as we say, mental health, behavioral health, health. So that was the component of it. And, a lot of families and friends, they actually really enjoyed that aspect of it. And what we wanted to do is now we want to expand. I'm looking to expand, we're looking to expand this TV into bringing in further resources, within the community, outside of the community, internationally, have programs for which includes more programs, for instance, sports. I know there's a lot of youths that, or individuals that watch my show that actually talk about sports, and they enjoy watching sports. And that can be sports that can vary from all spectrums. It can be the UFC, as I showed, my last clip was on UFC, basketball, baseball, cricket. I know there's a lot of Afghans and Muslims that are really big with cricket, so we can talk about that and have actual panelists and individuals come and talk about sports. Be able to not just come on TV, but also be able to move around and have seminars by having an athlete from our own community come out and tell our youngsters and family members and parents on safety of sports, on what are the set rules that are set for specific sports, what is a good time for a child to be in a sport. Have programs for our youth. We want to make sure that we have youth on the show to come and share their experience, and then really to encourage others to be on the show. And that's kind of the main thing, is to also connect our program with youth leaders and religious leaders. And for that, I want to let everyone know that this is part of the plan. We are starting to grow in terms of programmatic side of our work, and a lot of the programs that we've noticed that are doing well are also the ones in English. We're getting a lot of requests from others, to put on more English programs, because there's a lot of families and a lot of the youth and the youngsters that are looking to watch shows that are in English, or because it's more easy and it's more relatable for them. So for that, we're going to have those changes. So again, dear brothers and sisters, if you can, please continue to support us as you are, and let us know what is it that we can do to help and make easy for you in terms of the programs that we want to provide, so that you don't have to come seek the knowledge outside in the community, but you can call in and we can answer those questions a lot better, a lot easier. If we can't get to you today, guess what? We'll make sure we get to you tomorrow or the week after. And then the other thing I wanted to touch bases before I get on my topic of today is that I had gotten some inquiry questions from the community. I was basically out the past week, as I was conducting workshops, and there were a couple of questions that were asked of me from parents on how to help their children. The question number one was how to help my child with electronic usages. And that includes and could include, for instance, you have iPads, iPhones, you have TVs, and for that I want to make sure what is it that we need to do as families and parents to make sure things are better. So for that, what has happened is that during my seminar, that was probably one of the questions that was asked. Nowadays and now in today's generation, as we know, the usage of electronic devices has increased, and it's not just from parents' perspective, but also our community's perspective. It's also from a youth's perspective on how much usage of electronics is being used. So for that, I want to come ahead today and talk about what kind of impact do electronics have on kids. And what I had told the family, and the questions that I was given as, what is the best solution for this? And I have told, sorry folks, I'm just trying to fix the mic. That's why I'm not able to see you guys face to face right now. Give me 1 second, and let me fix this real quick. Alrighty, so we should be good now. Yes, so one of the questions that was asked was how to help the child with usage of electronics. It could be their iPads, their phones, their computers. And what I had told parents were, well, first and foremost, tell me, how is your usage of electronics at home? When you're coming at home, what do you do for the first thing? Are you actually spending time with your child and your family? Or what you're doing is going, sitting on the couch and watching TV. When the family's together on the dinner table, are you having is there a communal communication or a talk where you're asking your spouse of how her day was or his day was? Or are you talking to your children regarding, how their day went, how their schooling is, or how their school is going? Is there anything that the parent can do to help the child, or is there anything that the parent or the child is in need of support of, so the parent can provide? Or are you on your phone most of the time? So usually I don't get the answers from any majority of parents. They don't answer it because what is one of the things that even us as parents, as adults, that we lack is the fact that we are always on our phones. In today's generation, as we know, electronic devices are in need. In today's world, that is technology that is going to help and has helped us. So now the question here is that the more you do something, the more your child is going to mimic you and they're going to model you. So let's say you have a father and a mother. Let's say the mother is against telephone usage, or a video is against the child playing video games during the weekday. So the child comes to the mother and says, can I play video games? And the mother says no. So what that child is going to do is going to go and test to see what the father's answer is going to be. So when he or she goes and asks the father, can I go play video games? And the father says, yeah, go ahead. That child then gets, that child is going to go ahead and play video games, because over here, both party, the husband and the wife, they're not on the same page. And that's one of the difficulties that we have noticed in our communities, is that a lot of families are having a hard time working with their children. And the reason why for that is that, kids are not they're not raised in a household that is structured in a way where both parents are on the same page. You know, one parent is envisioning life much different for their children than the mother or the father is. So that makes it very confusing. It makes it confusing because both parents do not talk about it. There's a lack of communication within the actual household between the two adults. That's the one. That's probably number one biggest failure from parents. Number two, you have to understand, if your child is, if any child inside the household, what they do is children tend to model their parents. You know, from the day they're born, who do they see? They see their parents. Their parents are their world. So if a parent is upset, the child's upset. If the parent is happy, the child is happy. If the parent supports the child will go ahead without knowing what's around him and will just go full on and do what he or she wishes to do. That is how powerful, of a relationship a child and a parent has. So what ends up happening is that with today's society and today's world, what we came to realize is that we're so busy in our own lives that even us ourselves, we don't have self-care. And for that, when we get home, let's say we are constantly talking to one another, at our work, where we're so busy, we're so exhausted physically, mentally, that what ends up happening is that when we get home, we want quiet space. For that, we don't realize that, we are hurting our family members, our folks that are close to us. And for children, because they mimic, or what they do is they model what the parents do or what they say. One of the best solutions or scenarios I have told parents, and that which does work if you try it, is that the best thing would be from the moment you come to the house. The most easiest thing that you can do is that grab your phone. You can also grab, both parents grab their phones. They put it in a drawer, or they put it up on top of a desk, which they do not touch. First and foremost, the moment they take away that phone and they put the phone at a certain location where they're not allowed to touch it till maybe later the day or till tomorrow morning, that problem is solved. You will have that problem solved. When you show that to your child, that what, mom and dad doesn't like or doesn't use cell phones, that actually helps them understand and realize that having a cell phone is not important. What is more important is human connection, is to be able to speak to one another. And that's, me talking to my spouse, me talking to my children, me talking to my parents. That's more important than being on the cell phone all day long. And that's what ends up happening with children, is that, and the youth, as they get older, is that they become very reliant on cell phones, because there's less interaction at home. Number one, there's no engagement, there's no form of communication at home. That's number two. Number three, it's not fun. As a child, that's what kids do. Kids, youth, they want to be excited. They want to make sure that whatever they do, they talk in a fun manner with their parents. They talk in a social manner, when they're at home with their family members. But part of reality is that a lot of parents don't really give time to their children. Whenever their child comes in and talks to their parents, what the parents usually do is tell, either gives them an iPad or tells them, here, watch this show, watch this TV, and really dismisses the child. So with that, the child actually learns to become independent and becomes codependent upon an iPhone, TV, or an iPad, because that becomes their best friend. And not just that, but the child creates a relationship with that item, because that's who they feel very safe with it. They know that their iPhone will keep them happy. That's what it falls down to. And the other best thing is that make sure you guys are controlling your child's usage of electronics. It either, no matter what it is in life, what we do, make sure that we have a balance of what it is that we're doing. For a human being, in order for them to function fully and appropriately, in terms of, health-wise, mental health, everything needs to be done in balance. So even if it's usage of cell phones or phones or video games, you can tell your child, you have 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week to go play video games or watch TV once, 1 hour a day, and that's it. You guys have to start, making the rules. You have to implement it, and then you have to monitor it. This is where a lot of people fail. Is like they don't monitor. So by the time the child is, you implement, you tell them you're not going to do this for a day or two, it's fine. But then the parents kind of they back off, or they say, what, it's not a big deal. Let them watch TV or use the iPad because I am more calmer. But they tend to forget that they're actually hurting themselves and they're hurting their families and their children. So for that, again, brothers and sisters, what you have to know is that people can become very aggressive when people are too attached to their phones. Either it be seniors. I've seen a lot of seniors, who are senior adults. If I give you the epidemics of seniors are also very much connected to their phones, and the reason for that is that majority seniors who are 65 and older, they are experiencing social isolation. There's nobody there at the house to talk to them, and reasons for that is that they're at home. It's either the husband or the wife, or it's just one grandparent. Both children, it's either be the son, the daughter, or the daughter-in-law is not in the household. You have kids, the grandparents' grandkids are in school, so there's nobody inside the house. So what ends up happening is, over time, is that phone becomes their best friend. And from the moment you take away that phone, it either be a child, a teenager, or an adult, or a senior adult, they actually will start throwing a fit. They'll act, as we say, very aggressive. They'll get angry because you have taken away something from them that was very dear to them. Okay, so remember that. That's very important to make sure. The second thing I wanted to share with you guys is, give me 1 second. So again, brothers and sisters, if you guys have any questions, please do call. I will be able to answer your questions accordingly. Just let me know. And any questions that you have, either you can text me through Facebook. I do see the questions, and I can answer your questions. You can make a call at this studio. You have 2 telephone numbers. Give me a call. If you have anything that you guys want to share, if you have anything that you have any questions regarding, I can answer those questions appropriately. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and let me go ahead and talk about the second thing. What is it? So number 1 was aggression. So you have to remember aggression in terms, the moment a child, you take away something that's very valuable to them, they will get angry. And you have to know one more thing. A child does not understand when you take away a phone from them. So a lot of parents, they tend to lack and tend to understand the fact that if I give my child a cell phone or a phone, what ends up happening is the parent asks the child to do a certain task, and the child says, okay, I'll do it, or they'll say, I won't do it. So that angers the parent. When that angers the parent goes and grabs that device. When that happens, the child at that point of time does not know or does not understand the reason behind, why did you take away my phone or my iPad from me? Because the child doesn't know. The child's brains are developed in a way where they're not fully developed. They don't understand the notion of what is right and what is wrong. Anytime you tell them something, a child is not going to understand it the same way you and I or an adult does, with compared to children. So they become very aggressive. So that's why at times it happens is when you tell your child to take away the can you please take the trash to the trash can, to the gutter, the child either dismisses it, or it goes really, it goes from here and it comes out from this ear, because they're so busy with their iPads. And that tends to happen because you can't blame them. They're busy. They're enjoying their video game. And at this point in time, when they're enjoying their video game, you have to know that their energy levels are high, their dopamine levels are high, so they're enjoying the video game. So they're not, anything that you tell them is going to be kind of, it'll come and it'll just block off, and the child will just say, okay, I'll do it. But deep inside, after maybe even half an hour, when the child is done playing the video game, they'll say, what did you ask me to do? What was the question? So again, you have to be very patient. When you are taking away a child's iPad or an iPhone, when let's say the child does not take away that trash can or the trash from the house, what you have to do as parents is actually sit with your child, look at them in the eye and say, I asked you to take away, can you please take away the trash? And you did not do that. And for that, I am going to give you you cannot you cannot use your iPad. That's it. You have to be very specific to what it was you asked the child and what the child did not do and why you took away the product from them. And that's where the child turns to understand, okay, you know what? Mom is or dad is not happy because they asked me to do something. I did not do that. And in that sense, if the child does not do a certain thing that you asked them, what ends up happening is you give them as we call it, as a negative consequence. Negative consequence in terms that you don't get to play video games the whole day, or the 1 hour video game time that you have for tomorrow, you will no longer have that. What ends up happening as a child grows older, they don't want to do that because those are negative consequences. So let's say if a child does take away the trash, what you want to do is don't just sit there and say, you know what, okay, you just took away the trash. You want to say, thank you for taking out the trash. Tomorrow, you can go ahead and have an extra hour of playtime outside. That is a positive consequence. And for that, the child understands that, wow, if I do this, you know, my parents are happy. You know, there's an incentive behind it. And I know we tend to say, well, it doesn't have to be incentive all the time. And you're right, it doesn't. But in reality, even if it doesn't, let's say if your child does come to you and throws away the trash, what you can do is you can thank them and smile or kiss them or give them a hug. That's more powerful as well. It doesn't have to be, you know, bribing them for taking away the trash can, but it's a good form of communication. It's a good way to create a relationship with your child, as this will give them the platform later on in life to be able to succeed and following directions and doing good in their lives as well. So I have so I've got I believe it's Sister Zainab. Thank you for your comments. I give my salam to you. She's on Facebook, and she asks, the parents should be aware what theme children are going, what themes children are doing during the day. And it's true, yes. One of the other important aspect of your child's understanding, or the understanding of your child, is that the child needs to understand, and not just that, but even as parents, again, you have to understand the fact that whatever you ask your child to do, you have to follow up on it. What we fail to do as parents is that we give them a certain task, but we don't follow through on it. We don't monitor it. You have to be able to monitor it. You know, as we say, it's important for parents to know what your children are doing. And now getting back to the discussion of iPads again. Number one, I said aggression. Number two, there's developmental delays, and that includes things like if your child is just sitting there and it's and he or she is not, you know, using constantly using phones, iPads, computers. Developmental delays is that it plays a big effect on their brain. And not just that, but it becomes a learning disability for them, in terms, because they're so focused in playing video games and watching TV, they don't give the time to go and read. They don't have the time to communicate with other human beings. Even if when they do, they don't have the motivation, or they don't have the structure behind the children. You know, the children do not have that structure in order to go out and make friends out in the real world. What ends up happening is they become very shy. They're raised with low self-esteem. Again, they don't get time to go play. They don't read. They don't go and seek knowledge. They're not going, you know, to after-school programs. They're not joining debate teams. They're not doing things that are human connections, you know, in human ways, in order to go out and do things with the community, for themselves, to take care of themselves by doing physical sports, by playing chess. You know, it's good for the brain. So for that also becomes very difficult, and that becomes a challenge. So now parents are going to face a challenge, you know, in terms that your child is going to start to have a learning disability, in terms that when they're in school, they can't focus, right? Because their focus is on, well, when I go home, I have to go and beat level 10 because I'm still working on beating level 10. And that becomes a challenge for both the parents and the child, or the child is not able to problem solve a certain question, or a question during mathematics, their mathematics class, or they have a hard time reading, or they have a hard time spelling words because their focus is mainly on computers, and majority of the time is spent on computers, not on themselves. And number 4, brothers and sisters, it's very important that you have to take into consideration is obesity. One of the things that we have seen in research has shown that a lot of folks that actually sit, and that's what, even as adults, when you are working at an office setting, one of the main things that has been said is that make sure that you're actually standing up half an hour to an hour between your work during time of your work, is to get some blood circulation. And you don't want to just sit, because what happens is when you sit is that there's going to be no movement first and foremost in your body. There's no blood flow, as fast blood flow that needs to go to your brain. There's less blood flow from going from top to bottom, and your body is not moving, so it stays stiff. It becomes an issue for your back. It becomes an issue for your posture, and not just that, but you'll start to gain some weight around your waist. And let's say when you have a child and they're constantly playing video games, what you'll notice is that it becomes a weight issue. It's either the child does not eat a lot because they're so focused on video games, they just kind of have 2 snacks. When parents cook food, they don't want to come down, and the parents right then and there, what they make a big mistake is that they say, well, okay, when you don't want to come, don't come, there's no food for you, or eat when you're hungry. Don't ever do that. What you have to do is, as parents, is go up to their door. It's lunchtime, please turn off your video games. You have them turn off your video games and put it on pause. They come and eat. Then what you want to do is you say, good job for coming down and eating. Now you can go ahead and go continue your video game. That's it. When you say, no, I'm going to leave my child and not let him come down, and forget it. If he doesn't want to come, doesn't want to come. That's wrong parenting. I hope you guys understand that, but that becomes more of, it becomes more of somebody who's in the house that's not relatable, or who's not related to you. It's like, whatever, if he wants to come, they'll come. If it doesn't, it don't. No, this is your child. You have to take initiative. You have to take ownership. This is your child who you want to raise in a world to succeed. Failures are there, but you want to help them create a structure that won't affect them later in life, where with his or her behavior later in life, when they get older, they'll have a hard time going to school because they'll be late all the time. They'll have a hard time finishing assignments on time. They'll have a hard time at work because they're always late. So that becomes a problematic issue later in life for them. And so when it comes to obesity as well, is that like I said, it's either underweight, or what ends up happening is a lot of kids are starting to put on a lot of weight because they're not moving. They're not exercising. It's not as joyful anymore. And like I told you again, kids, they enjoy dopamine. Anything that gives them fast, rush, there's excitement, there's chemicals that release in the brain, as we call it, dopamine, that is released when the child feels good. And that dopamine allows the child to feel good. So when they play a video game, or they're playing a game or watching TV, they're more excited in terms of there's entertainment, there's songs, there's music that makes them feel good. And for that, it becomes an issue later in life because they're not moving as much either. I know I've talked a lot, brothers and sisters. So what we're going to do is, usually during my talks, I play some videos that will help us and help you understand some of the reasoning for why I give my talks. And it actually also backs it up with factual research, so that you guys are well aware of it, that if today if somebody doesn't believe me and says, what, he's just talking because he is just talking. No, there's actually research. I do article research, I check online, I take data, I take statistics, and I also try to bring in a video of different researchers or actual aspect of life scenarios that has been captured digitally, through media, and I share it with you folks. And again, remember, sometimes books are not fun, but when you make this when you take this content and you put it on TV, it becomes much easier, because that's how we're scheduled, right? We don't want to, a lot of people don't like reading anymore, so it's easier to do it through TV. So let me get this for you guys, so you guys can watch. So you have.
As technology becomes more and more portable, it can become hard to not rely on it for the little things in our lives.
But experts say putting electronic devices in the hands of your children can be dangerous. Jacqueline Kovac has the story.
Cell phone addiction, it's becoming more common. According to a national study, 1 in every 8 kids becomes an addict.
They feel that all of their interaction is coming through that device versus through face-to-face interaction. And again, that the negative consequences of not having it don't matter to them, that they feel that they must actually have it to feel okay.
Dr. Mary Berg, a clinical psychologist, says you can tell when your child is addicted, when they can't do their homework because they can't put down the device. They would rather socialize with the device rather than face-to-face. And they're not sleeping because they must be using the device at all times. The American Academy of Pediatrics says children under the age of 12 should not have any exposure to a cell phone or tablet. But kids today can be found using the device just as much as adults.
It's kind of crazy because I was never that dependent on technology when I was that young. And I feel like now that they're starting this young, they're going to become dependent on it.
According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, allowing children to use cell phones or tablets can do more harm than good because their brains continue to develop. Cell phone and tablet use can lead to aggression, developmental delays for language and speech because they rely on the devices to communicate. And they're having trouble critically thinking on their own, leading to learning disabilities. And the lack of movement can then lead to obesity.
To learn how to communicate face-to-face is a normal childhood developmental phase, and the cell phones and the iPads are certainly robbing children of that opportunity. Using a cell phone or an iPad as a parent, as a babysitter for your child, is causing your child great harm.
Parents who allow their children to use devices before age 12 say it's become a part of our culture, and they don't really see an issue with it.
Well, if he sees that it's in my hand, or if I'm using something with electronic device, he'll come over and he'll try to get on my lap, or he'll try to come and take it out of my hand so he can use it for his own personal use. And then sometimes he'll cry until I actually just hand it to him. So.
For some, phones and tablets are used strictly for learning.
So normally in the morning, we normally use the program for abcmouse.com, and she loves it. So it was a little hard for her to get started, but once she got started, she wants to use it all of the time, every day. She's learning to write her name very well, read, and do math.
Dr. Berg says if you suspect your child is becoming addicted, set limits and stick to them.
It's okay to say we've been too lenient and we need to make some changes. It's about teaching your kids boundaries. It's about limiting, of course, just like you would anything. And it's about teaching kids how to defer gratification versus getting everything right away, right now.
The American Academy of Pediatrics suggests limiting your child's exposure to TV or the computer for educational purposes only, and that kids between ages 3 to 5 should only have about 1 hour of TV and computer time. Kids older than 6 can have about 2. Jacqueline Kovac, 6 News.
Devices are not healthy and how they're not safe. And one of the things that I have also came to realize and understood is that before I mention more and talk more on this topic, is that I got a question by Brother Sean Fazeli, and he had mentioned, and he's asking a question, can you please explain about conditions and why we get conditioned, and then why it's so hard to change a habit. So usually what ends up happening is that we get conditioned in a very young age, right? So I even mentioned it earlier that you have to be very mindful that as children we get older. As we get older, we get conditioned in terms of doing things, or seeing our parents teach us on how to become a certain way. So for that, what ends up happening is that usually parents, as they get older, especially those parents those parents that actually don't really tend to understand, is that when you don't give too much time to your child, when you are having a hard time teaching your child on how to be, how to work with your child. And the reason why I say that is that
a lot of parents have kids, but they're not perfect parents, or they're not capable of being parents yet. And the reason why I say that is that, let's say you get in a marriage. You get in a marriage, husband and wife. You have to build your way up. Usually what happens is, what I've seen is that in marriages, couples, young couples, they tend to have children right away, which becomes very difficult. The reason why I say that is that, first and foremost, they don't have a strong structure, where they're not on the same page. It takes quite an amount of time. Sometimes it's easier to join together and have same values, share same commonalities, but especially for those parents that are actually young parents here in America. And the reason why my show is really in English is because my show is really geared towards the youngsters, folks that lived here in the U.S. For young parents who are who have children, is that you guys have to do your research on how to be parents. And to be honest, I know we see our parents, the way they raise us, and then later on when we try the same thing with our children, it doesn't work out. Well, guess what? Every situation is different. Every society is different. Every need is different. And for that, we always tell families, and especially parents, is that before individuals, is that before you get married, always have a premarital counseling. So you guys are on the same page as couples. After that, make sure that when you have a child, make sure that you are actually sitting together and talking about how do you want to raise your child. What are the do's, what are the don'ts? And those are important, because if you don't do that, your child's going to grow up very confused. And when you're given iPads, iPhones to your children, they get addicted to it, that means that family does not have a structure built that actually is unified between the husband and the wife. So that's what ends up happening, is that when the husband and wife do not see eye to eye, or they're living a life according to, because they're busy, and things like that happen. But at the same time, what that happens is the fact that two parents are working, or let's say one parent is working, the other parent comes in, but he or she does not put the effort to work with that parent. And basically what happens is that, let's say for instance, if I'm working and my wife is a stay-at-home mother, I cannot just say, it's your job to just take care of my children. It doesn't work that way. And it shouldn't work that way, because those are your children. You have to give them time. Whatever your wife is doing, make sure that you are aware of things. So tomorrow, if your child comes to you, you know what are the do's and what isn't allowed. So tomorrow, let's say for instance, if you want your child to be raised in a certain way, your wife will make sure that it takes place and it takes its course, because you want that from your child. So remember, usually a lot of these issues come up because parents have a hard time understanding their children. What ends up happening is parents, they don't know how to work with their children. For that, in order to really take the easy way out, is to hand them over something to get them distracted, so the parents don't have to really deal with it, because the parents are already going through so much difficulty themselves. And for that, that's what ends up happening, is that the fact that children get conditioned because they don't get that much attention. And you can condition a child in a certain way or in any different ways, but even if you don't fall through on a certain situation or a certain topic, that child will eventually become conditioned as they become codependent upon materials like electronic iPads, iPhones, and that's what ends up happening. And now I know I talked about electronic usage, because this was one of the questions that were actually asked of me during one of my training that I give. It was regarding depression and suicide at one of the mosques. So that was one of the questions. And now the second question, that can also be relatable to it, is the question of how a suicide had taken place that week. When I went to the masjid, they said that a week prior to it, there was a suicide case that took place. A young person who was very disconnected from society, but was very engaged with electronics, social media, people from social media talking to him. Sometimes when people talk and let's say your iPhone is everything to you, and your social media is everything to you, when people from the other side starts to say negative things, that's going to leave a negative imprint on you. So parents' concerns, when is a good age, this is the second question they asked me was, when is a good age to introduce the topic of suicide with our children? A lot of people, for those that do not know, brothers and sisters, suicide is one of the highest leading cause of death amongst children, youth, and senior adults. And for when it comes to kids who are 10 to 14, it's the third leading cause of death. When it comes to kids who are from 15 to 24, it's the second leading cause of death. And if you look at it, I mean, just by giving out these statistics, these are factual statistics that children are actually committing suicide. So one of the questions that I was asked was, when is a good time to talk or introduce the topic of suicide to your children? From the very moment that, the moment they start talking, you have to actually talk about not just suicide. You don't have to talk about death, but you have to talk about what are the signs and symptoms to your child. So the highest leading cause of suicide is severe depression. So before you even get to suicide and make it easier for yourself, I know a lot of families, they get very uncomfortable talking about this topic. But what they say is that if I talk to my child, it will give them an idea, which is actually false. It does not give an idea. It actually helps the child to understand that, you know what, this is a common reality of today's world. People do think of suicide. People do think of hurting themselves. People do, hurt others. And that's the reality of today's world. And not just that, but this has been going on since mankind. So what I tell parents is that you don't have to talk about death exactly right then and there. What you can do is, let's look at what is the highest leading cause of death. It's depression. It's roughly 60 to 65% of severe depression cases lead to suicidality. Folks that commit suicide, that end their life. So what I tell them is that, you know what depression is? Yes. Parents say yes. So then what I tell them is that, if you know what depression is, can you talk to your child about what is depression? Or what does it look like? And they say, yes, we can do that. So then talk to them about that. Talk to them that, whenever you're feeling like, you have bad headaches, you have stomach cramps, you're sleeping too much, you cannot sleep, you're eating too much, or you can't sleep, or you feel like, life is becoming very difficult and you cannot think, come and talk to me. Simple as that, because those are signs of depression. And let's say, for instance, if a child has depression and that takes its toll on the child, what ends up happening is that will over time stay consistently for over a year, 2 years, then it becomes severe, where the child can no longer wrap their heads around. And that's normal for adults too. Adults who have depression, depression is anything that's, mild depression is anything that's from 2 weeks, 2 weeks and lower. Any severe major depression symptoms come after good 2 weeks to a month. Consistently it goes on and it doesn't go away. Now you have severe depression because you're constantly, rethinking of that certain situation that took place. There's some form of trauma in your life that had happened. So you're constantly thinking of that certain situation that doesn't get out of your head because you're not talking to anybody. You're not seeking help. And for that, what ends up happening is life is like a tunnel. Now think about it. Life is like a tunnel. You're looking through a tunnel and you can see the other end of the tunnel with a light. So people who are depressed, what ends up happening with that tunnel is that tunnel actually starts to curve in and it ends. There's no light at the other end. And for that, the person looks back and the person looks front, and you're in the middle of the tunnel and there's no opening to it. So what ends up happening is you end up feeling hopeless. You wasted so much energy in terms of trying to work your way around that it becomes difficult without asking the help of a professional. And for that, when you lose hope, when you become hopeless and when you have no hope, you give up on life. When you give up on life, you commit suicide and you end up killing yourself. So you have to remember that, brothers and sisters. So now the other question, excuse me, let me ask that. Brother Sean asked at what age is child conditioning starting? So child conditioning really starts from the age they're born. There's a great material and a course that I conduct, it's through Access California Services, which we work at. It's parenting classes. And I always encourage families, when you are parents, especially the newer parents, who have kids nowadays. And I know nowadays parents, youngsters, they are going out and they're doing research. Excuse me, my throat's still not doing well coming back from Umrah. So what ends up happening is I tell parents, what you need to do is, first and foremost, when you get married, give yourself some time. Give both parties, the husband and wife, some time to learn from each other. Learn to understand each other. See if things are going to work out amongst one another. Before having a child. What usually happens is that either the young couples do not understand, or what ends up happening is they have peer pressure from family members and from communities. So you go have a child and this will happen. Have a child and the husband will spend more time with you. Have a child and your wife will do this. It's not going to work out like that. You have to first and foremost learn to understand each other. And that takes time. That can take years. But you have to be patient. And that's part of reality. If you want a safe, strong structure and a strong bondage between the husband and wife, and a strong, a child that knows, like, okay, my parents, this is how they live their life together, that child will have an easier time growing up. Because both parents are on the same page. So once that happens, first both the husband and wife, they learn to understand each other. What they need to do is they need to sit down and plan on, okay, now that we are going to have a child, how much time are we going to spend with the child? Who's going to spend the time with the child? Let's say if both parties, both husband and wife are working, who's going to spend more time with them? Today's world and today's reality, we have to understand that this cost of living is very high. And being in SoCal, California and Orange County, cost of living is high, to be honest. For me it is. So what we do is we ask families to first and foremost talk to each other and talk about, okay, who's going to take care of the child? How are we going to raise him? How are we going to raise him? Do we want to raise him at an Islamic, do we want to send them to an Islamic school or a public school or a private school? Where should the child spend most of their time? By what age? You have to forecast and you have to make plans for that child as well. And that's a long-term plan. Short-term plans are things like, okay, when we have a child, I don't want my child spending more than an hour watching TV. That's something that both parents need to come together, they need to understand, and they both need to also do the same. So parents, they need to do the same thing. So the parent can't just say, I want my child to do A, B, and C, and tells one parent, and you see the other parent going and like watching TV every day. It doesn't work that way. It's like playing a sport team. You're in one team. You're on, like, for instance, on one soccer team. You have to make plans. You have to make arrangements. How do you want your child? What language do you want them to speak? And then for that, both parents need to focus, and parents need to work on it, and both parents need to agree on that. So when that doesn't happen, when parents are not taking the materials, or they're not learning things about children, about parenting tips, they tend to fail. And when they fail, the child again tends to go ahead, as they get older, or as they're 4 or 5, they tend to realize, my parents are not there. They're not acknowledging my needs, my wants, because the child wants interaction. That's what it is. The child is new. They want interactions. They want to talk to you. They'll eat your ears off. The child will come and they'll talk to you about things that you would say, what is going on? Like, where's the off button? And that's just the beauty of that child, is that child needs interaction, and you have to have time for them. You have to give them time. And for that, again, if you want your child to be well conditioned, it starts from earlier on, even when the child's not born. Both parents need to go ahead and take classes. Both parents need to educate themselves on parenting. If anything, what I can do is, if you guys want to request, I can also sit down and have courses and discussions on parenting. I can make a scenario or different videos on, how to utilize effective parenting with your child when they're born. There are information and resources out there that actually are evidence-based practices that actually works best with children here in America. So that can be a child from who's Muslim, who's Christian, who's who's atheist, who is from Afghanistan, who's from from Pakistan, who's from India, from America. That program is proven to work here in the States with children. So we can always sit down and work and discuss that scenario with parents if that helps. But yeah, you start off from a very young age, brothers and sisters. And the second question I was asked was, most parents don't have the right information for their kids to help a child. And that is true, most parents do not. So for that, we always say, you know what, educate yourself. Even before you have a child, go ahead and learn a little. First and foremost, again, the husband and wife, you need to learn each other first. You have to build a strong structure between one another to better understand each other and to be able to know what is your guys' needs and wants, and what do you guys want what do you guys want from one another, first and foremost. Secondly, and that's probably after a good couple of years, even before having the child, maybe a year or two before, you have to sit and plan things out. This is actually a sitting down and planning things out. It just can't be just, okay, we're just going to have a child and things are going to play out. It doesn't work that way, and it's it's not easy as that. So for that, we have to sit down. We have to take parenting classes. We have to grab books, read on parenting tips, read the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and other books of Islamic law as well, just to see what are parents' role Islamically. What is and then from there, you take books that work in today's world, in today's society, and see how that works best for you and your parent and for your child. And I hope that helps out, and I hope that helps you guys. Now I want to move again and talk about the question that I was asked was, when there is a loss of a family member, who should the child talk to? I was asked this question, when there's a death in the family, it's very traumatic. As we all know, we have lost family members, we have lost close ones to us, very important people in our families, our intimate partners, like for instance our spouses. Some people have lost their husbands, children, parents have lost their children. For those who came from war-torn countries, they've lost their family members, their parents, their community. There's folks that are very dear to you, even if they're not. You come to realize that people are either killed or they kill themselves, and that's never an easy way out. So the question that I was asked was, when a person is when a person loses a family member to suicide, what should the child do, and who should they talk to? My question here for the parent and for the family is, first and foremost, this is not the matter of just the child and being affected. Usually at this point in time, every single person, every single member of the family is affected. I know as parents, as siblings, older siblings, we tend to be very strong, so we don't show any weakness. The presence of the children or to our parents, when, let's say, God forbids, if something does take place in the family. So what you want to do is that, as for me, to give the answer to this question, is that child is not the only one suffering, brothers and sisters. But even I tell the family, it is you yourself that's also suffering. You're in a stage of guilt. You're in a stage of denial. You're in a stage of bargaining with God. Asking, why did this happen? I wish I was there to protect. I was there to help. Why take my life away? These are the questions. What we call is this scenario, or this component of the session is it's called the grief and loss session. What we end up doing is we ask the family to come in as a whole, not just the child, because what you don't want to do is that you don't want the child thinking that there's something wrong with that person only, because it's not. And the matter of the fact and reality is that every single one of you have or has been affected by death. So for that, we ask the family to come in together. When the family comes in together, that child will hear and listen to other family members as they talk about the loss of the loved one. When that happens, what ends up happening, that child will learn to understand that it's okay. I'm not the only one that feels this all the time. I'm not the one that's crying all the time, because there's other people in the family crying, so this is okay. Part of death becomes, as Muslims, it's part of death is part of our Islam. It's normal, but it's okay, and you have to introduce it to the child very nicely. And not just that, but the family needs to come out and have a family session, so everyone's on the same boat and everybody is able to get the proper help, and not just that, but to understand one another. And it helps the child too in the long term. So brothers and sisters, I'm going to go ahead and talk about, I'm going to show you guys a video. This video contains, it talks about teen suicides growing at an alarming rate, and then we have a second one as well. So please, I would encourage you guys to enjoy this video, and then when we come back, we will go ahead again.
From the Centers for Disease Control, researchers say teenage suicide is growing at an alarming rate. Since the year 2000, the suicide rate for teens is up 28%, with a startling average of 5 deaths a day. Jerika Duncan looks into what's behind the rising teen toll.
He was just an all-around great kid. He was an athlete.
Jennifer Gonzalez says her 17-year-old son, Jack Farrell, seemed fine last Thanksgiving.
And the next day I get woken up by the police knocking on my door saying I needed to come with them right away. I found out then that he shot himself in the head.
New CDC data shows suicide rates for boys like Farrell, age 15 to 19, increased more than 30%. 3 years ago, Conrad Roy died in this truck from carbon monoxide poisoning after his friend, Michelle Carter, encouraged him to commit suicide through dozens of text messages. In a highly publicized trial, we learned both teens suffered from mental illness. The CDC also says suicide rates for teenage girls are at a 40-year high. Experts cite family instability and substance abuse among some factors for suicide, but the role of cyberbullying is becoming more prevalent. In June, 12-year-old Mallory Grossman took her own life. Her mother, Diane, says it was because she was harassed in texts, on Snapchat, and Instagram.
In the beginning, it was teasing, it was name-calling, it was exclusion was an important part. You can't sit here, you're not welcome at this table.
Professor Jean Twangy is a psychologist at San Diego State University.
Teens are much more likely now than they were just 5 years ago or 7 years ago to say that they're anxious and depressed and thinking about suicide.
In a provocative new article for The Atlantic, Twangy makes a correlation between the popularity of smartphones and increased rates of suicide and depression among young people.
Teens who use electronic devices more hours a day are more likely to be at risk for suicide.
Researchers say the so-called smartphone generation is less likely to have face-to-face interaction with friends, which they say is crucial for mental health and for building social skills.
Welcome back, brothers and sisters. As you guys saw in the video, it talked about how suicide rates are going up. And not just that, but it's going up amongst teenagers even more. But you can also see that there's more suicide rates higher amongst teenagers that are girls. And again, with girls, there's a lot of body image issues. And as I have said it earlier in my previous talks, that for children and for youth, especially for girls, is that girls fall into a trap of how today's society and media portrays individuals in today's world. So you have to be aware that for a child or for a girl, you know, they look at TV shows, they look at other celebrities, and they want to be like them. And then what they tend to not understand that a lot of celebrities that are, you know, that are making, you know, they're putting on too much makeup on, or have done plastic surgery, and either be on their face, their bodies, their lips, their faces, are really, and really importantly, it's not real. You know, it's actually done, but it's in reality it causes a lot of harm. You know, there's also benefits to it, like, you know, infection. There's people that actually have lost their lives to doing what is it called, plastic surgery, or a lot of folks that do like lip works. So a lot of this causes a lot of problems with a lot of our youngsters. So the way the market is played out is that, again, advertisements here in the state is very highly put forward into the growth market. So in our society, everybody enjoys watching movies, everybody enjoys playing games. So for that, what I always tell the girls is that you have to be mindful of the one thing that I want to let you guys know and understand is that as teenagers, you have to know that when you are looking at a Snapchat, when you're looking at a Facebook, or you're looking at a celebrity in general, period, what you have to understand is that you yourself are one person that makes you you. You have to understand that. So you go, you're an 18-year-old girl or 17-year-old young sister who's actually getting ready. You're doing your hair, you're putting on makeup, and you're getting ready to start the day. For celebrities, it's very much different. And what they tend to do is that it's not just one person that does the job. First and foremost, they don't even do the job. What ends up happening is that they have a team. So for that one person that puts a post up on social media, that individual has the work of specialized individuals of, let's say, 6 to 12 people. You have like 2-3 people working on their hair, like 2-3 people working on their makeup, on their clothing, on their appearance. And for that, it becomes overwhelming, because a lot of our youth and our youngsters, it goes to guys too, they try to be somebody that they're not, and then when they do try that, it's not factual. So what ends up happening is that it backfires on them, and for that, it causes a lot of issue when it comes to a lot of our youth and a lot of the sisters. Is that the body imaging is very bad, and it has caused a lot of difficulties in today's society, because it's sad to say, but our society really sees females as really, they look at their body figures before they look at their intellect, their iman. So for that, again, I tell you guys, try to do your best to understand a lot of these information, because these form of information could hurt you, or it can be very bad for you and for your health as well. So I wanted to go ahead and to move on and start our actual topic that I actually wanted to share for today. So if you guys have questions, again, brothers and sisters, please give me a call. Give me a call on my screen, or leave me a text, or write something on Facebook so I can answer your questions. So now that we're done with the notion of electronics, tablets, TVs, electronic devices, and suicides, because the reason why I attached it, because those were the common questions that have been asked. And not just that, but even at least 2 of the sheikhs that I spoke to, the imams, they had told me that they have youth programs in their school Fridays, and roughly they get 60 to 80 students each. So what they had told me was that what was very interesting for me was that they said the number one topic that the children that are always interested, that they're always interested in, is suicide. They always want to know about it. They always want to talk about it. There's shows regarding suicide. I think there was a show recently that came out, was called 13 Reasons Why. So those are actual factual situations that has taken place in programs that are affecting the youth and the children. So again, now we're going to go ahead and now move down to the actual discussion of what it is that we want to talk about, and what it is that today's session was actually going to be about. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed the topic. So today's topic, and what I wanted to discuss, was the benefits of goal setting. Very simple, very easy. Again, this if you are able to successfully set and achieve personal goals for yourself, you will experience many benefits. So that can be, even if you don't reach all of your goals, just having them can enrich your life in a number of ways, as we say it. And what I mean by that is that benefits of goal setting, and what those are, and why we should have those goals. First and foremost, goals give you a direction and a destination. They give you something to aim and direct at it very effectively towards, and for you to work towards as well. So what does that mean? Goals. What are goals? For either be a child, an adult, or seniors. Every day of our lives, as we get, as we grow older, we set goals. It either be short term or it either be long term. But we want to set a path for ourselves in order to be able to, for instance, have our goal, both short and long term, is to be able to pray 5 times a day. What do you need to do for that? Well, you have to be able to wake up, especially morning prayers. You have to have availability, or find availability to do your prayers, and then even have the courage, have the patience to do wudu. I've heard folks that have a hard time even doing wudu. Just for that process they don't pray. So again, you have to have a form of direction, instructions that you want to set your mind towards in order to benefit yourself in terms of here in this world and the world afterwards. Again, benefits of providing directions and what that looks like. They can help direct you towards your ultimate in what you want into your life. By setting goals that helps you ultimately and by achieving the bigger picture in life. You set a long-term plan. Within that long-term plan, what you can do is complete the short-term goals that lead to your long-term plans, and that's what you need to do. Setting lifetime goals is something like choosing the destinations you ultimately want and you want to reach. Therefore, instead of wandering through life, what you can do is you're able to determine where you want to go. So if you don't have set goals in life, what ends up happening when you don't have set goals in life? You wander. Not just that, but you start a certain program. Let's say you are at a certain. Let's say Let's give you a good example for kids first. Let's say you're a middle school child. You're in 6th grade or 7th grade. What ends up happening is, now let me give you the 2 different scenarios of what's effective and what's not effective. If you are goal-oriented, in terms that your goal is to complete your homework once you get home. Okay? Complete your homework once you get home. Now, what is the process like? The middle process like? Do you hear, and once you're given homework at school, do you actually just take that paper and say, you know what, okay, I got these papers and I have to do these papers, or when the teacher says, please read pages 25 to 27, 2-3 pages at home, do you actually write them down in your binders, or in your, I believe it was called your dictionary book? Usually what I do is, when I have a certain task, I write them down. I make small little marks on my notebook on a daily basis, and I go through my list of what I need to finish throughout the day. And I just work on it one at a time. Once I complete it, and I work on something else. So, or do you actually have a binder where you actually write down everything? So now look at the benefits and the pros and cons. If you're somebody that actually writes down your homework, and writes down, okay, today I have this homework for this class. For science classes, for my science class, I have to read 5 pages. I write it down. For my math class, I have to finish pages 7 and 10. Versus you just not even writing anything down, and you're like, I'm going to be able to obtain that information in my head. Just generally speaking, what's more effective? The person writing, or the person just kind of says, I can just hold information in my head and just do it. Well, guess what? Both parties can hold information equally. What becomes more effective is when the person that has written that homework down, they have set a structure for themselves. It makes it a lot easier for them. So for instance, if you are not able to remember something, now where do you fall? Rather than calling your friends or calling your classmates, hey, what was this again? I forgot, I didn't write it down. Do you want to do that, or do you rather want to do it on your, to be able to complete something on yourself by yourself, and have, and be able to achieve that reward, and feel even better. You have a good structure set for yourself where you're writing down your homework. You have set a path, a direction that you want to take in terms of, in order for you to complete your homework, is to write down your homework. That's the path you took. So that's what works best when you're a child. So again, clearly focus on what's important. Your goals give you a clear focus on what you believe to be important to you and in your life. Therefore, it is essential when setting your personal goals, you first think about what is important to you and what you want to accomplish in life. Those are very important. Always try to remember what is really important for you and what is it that you want to accomplish for life. And based on that, that's how you set your goals. If you take time to truly reflect on your hopes and dreams, your goals will center on what is important to you. So again, the beauty of humans are that we get to dream and we get to want and work towards what we want to see in life. A person does not just build a building and says, you know what, I'm just going to build a building. No, they have to envision it. What is the purpose behind that, the building? Why do I want to build that building? Do you want to build it because I want to make it the world's tallest building in the world? That's something that you envision. But in order to do that, you just don't jump into that and say, you know what, it's going to work, it's going to happen in 2 days. Yes, your vision is there. You have to set goals. You have to set a certain clear, focused plan. You have to be, mentally, you have to be able to check in. Physically, you have to be able to put time into it, and then be able to set short-term plans on. Okay, so I have this vision. How do I get to those visions? So I'm going to pick up this phone call, and then we will come back. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes. Salam.
Am I live?
Yes, you're live. Salam.
Okay.
Yeah.
Salam alaikum.
Salam.
First of all, I have to say, very nice program. Really good, very informative.
Thank you very much.
And I want to bring two points to attention.
Yeah.
One is that if our children have some disability or some shortcoming, we have to take care of it. For example, if they have crossed eyes, crooked nose, or something that affects their self-esteem, we have to take care of it, especially if we're living in the US or Europe. There are procedures that he thinks is available. Let's do it. And not cosmetic, but they're medical treatment that gives them self-confidence.
Yes.
Second point is not to be too strict in dress codes. Give in a little bit, because if we send them to we go to school, they're so different, they also will be bullied. Their self-confidence will cause them get depressed.
Okay.
If you can talk about these 2 points, I would appreciate it. Again, very nice program.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so the sister asked 2 questions. Number 1 was physical impairment in terms of, when sometimes, our brothers and sisters, sometimes people have, like, for instance, instead of 5 fingers, they'll have 6 fingers, they'll have 6 toes, and these are part of reality. People do have certain impairments, or when something's wrong with their appearance. For instance, when I talked about, cosmetics, those are, for instance, for people who are fully good in terms of, there's nothing wrong with them, or they're not medically told that you have to, you have an option to do, or you have an option to go ahead and do a procedure to make to help yourself. And for that, if it's something that is required, or there's an option given to that, which could help in terms of, let's say, a brother. I know there was a brother recently. When he was younger, he broke his nose, so his nose was to the side. It was crooked. So what the parents realized was that the nose was crooked, people were making fun of him, and then one of the nostrils weren't working properly. So the doctors give the child an option. First and foremost, that child actually was not getting bullied at all, what I've noticed from him, because his personality was very strong. That's the thing. When your personality is strong, when you're happy with yourself, you'll be happy no matter what. Either if you have if you have a messed up eye, or if something's wrong with your body. The main idea, the beauty of the religion of Islam is that the fact that you have to learn to appreciate and enjoy yourself. If your child is born a certain way, you work with them according to how they are in terms of where their physical impairment is, or their mental impairment is. So if a child is having a hard time, I would rather work with that child instead of just doing medical surgeries on that child, because what you have to understand is that unless that child needs a surgery because it is actually recommended, then that should be done. If it's something that's just provided for the child because the child is being bullied, then that means that the child can also come out, can get out of bulliness, and that's basically bringing the child in first and foremost to a mental health professional to work on their self-esteem. Not just that, but the family itself can come inside. They can come to counseling as well, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, it's consultation. In fact, that the child just wants support. Again, if parents are very supportive of their children, the child will not care what the world says. If a child is seeing, let's say family members not liking them, it's very important to say, and this has happened in reality as well, is that one of the biggest things that I always talk about is that the sense of bullying. Bullying actually starts at home. You have to be very mindful. Parents actually bully their children. Brothers bully their sisters. Sisters bully their brothers. And that becomes a hard topic, or it becomes very difficult for that child as they're growing up in that family, is that once they go out into the real world, they don't have that self-esteem anymore. They don't have that self-esteem anymore because they have already lost it, and they're not comfortable in their own shoes yet. So you want to be able to help them in terms of structuring them, by actually setting up strong pillars of having the family members be supportive of that. But again, if it's not medically required, it's up to the family and how you guys feel it's best. Just by fixing it, it can probably fix the appearance, but it will not fix what is on the inside of the child. You have to remember that. That's the main thing. Secondly, self-confidence in terms of being more lenient with clothing. I would say it's again, clothing, it will fall into the same scenario. So one of the things that I came to realize is that as children, as youth, it's very difficult. Because children, you have to remember, in the house and inside the house, children, they live a certain household. So if a child, is living in a household that is, in a household that has parents, who are, let's say, strict, they go out and now they're seeing people in the community, and now the child's like, I want to be able to mesh with my, with kids here outside. And then now the parents are saying, well, no, you can't do that because we don't want you to do that. This is something that we've never grew up doing, and we don't want you to wear a certain dress code or have a certain dress code in life. It's either those parents that allow their kids to have a certain dress code. If it's the same throughout the household, it's the child will wear what the parent wears, so it doesn't become a problem. But for those parents that actually are difficult in terms of saying that they're being tougher on the child because of a dress code, there's usually other factors to that. A dress code does not just affect a child's mental health aspect just by that. The child comes in and says, I don't want to go to school because people make fun of me, because I look a certain way, I smell a certain way, and I do things a certain way. I'd be very honest with you. When I first came to the U.S., I was just 10 years old. So what happened with me was, growing up in a Muslim, in an Afghan household, parents conservative. So what ended up happening was that as I was getting older, and I was in school, a lot of kids were bullying me, and the fact behind that was that, I didn't wear the same dress code as they did. I had baggy pants, my hair was kind of all over the place, and nobody wore gel. I would see other kids wearing gel. I didn't understand that. That was the thing. I didn't understand it. And what happened was that the kids were trying to do things, or they would bully me, and I myself would tell myself, they're bullying me because I'm different. That's what it was. I was like, they're bullying me because I'm different. So when I go home, whenever I went home and I talked to my parents, or they used to see some changes in me, then they would say, what is going on? There's something going different. There's some changes in you now. And that does occur. Changes do occur within households and within families. And then what happens is that the person that actually do suffer the most is that child. Because now parents also need to understand that it's important to understand that your child is living in a country that has different cultures. It has different cultures and multiple cultures. And I've also been a big advocate, because over the years I came to learn, and I came to learn really myself, and how I became very comfortable with myself, is that culture can change, and it will change. It make it very difficult for the family, and it will make it very difficult for the child. What has made it very simple and easy for me now is that I'd be very honest with you. You know, I actually go to events, I go to weddings. I mean, I'm not conservative, but I mean, I enjoy my life. But in terms of, I do it in an Islamic way. I do it in an Islamic way, as long as it doesn't pass any of those barriers, it's good. There's certain cultural factors that I do not inherit as much anymore. I don't think it's important, because that do cause a lot of problems and issues. And what I have noticed is that a lot of families do take into consideration culture more than religion nowadays, or they don't actually realize that they overstep religion, and that's where it becomes very difficult. For that child that's, you know, that's having an issue of, like, you know, I need to you know, be able to wear a dress, or be able to wear clothing a certain way. That's something that, you know, depending on the age, you know, a child could wear certain clothing depending on a certain age, on a particular way, until they actually hit you know, maturity. And then you kind of talk to the child, and you help them understand, like, listen, this is why you shouldn't wear this clothing, because this is part of the religion or the culture. And that's, then the parent has to talk to the child. If the parent does not talk to the child from a very young age and says why you shouldn't wear a clothing this certain way, and just says, you know what, we don't do this, that doesn't help the child. That's not going to help the child when you go to your child and say, you know what, we don't do this. No, you don't do this. The child might do that. That's you know, they're living a different world now. You have to be able to talk to the child, help them understand why they shouldn't do it, or even when they do it, they should know the pros and cons of it. That's the difference between it. And again, in that matter, I think it's more than just clothing. I think the child itself needs to, you know, is having that clothing issues, as well as that they have low self-esteem, because it's more than just clothing. There's more stuff that's going on in their life. Just clothing is not going to make them happy. Because again, they can wear what they want. Tomorrow, they'll be bullied for some other reasons as well. So it's all about personality, self-esteem, and it's really about structure and self-identity. The moment children have that fully, you know, that are fully capable of having that strong identity, it's easier for them. And dear brothers and sisters, one of the other things is that when your child is at the ages of 10 to 18, they're going through a stage called identity versus identity confusion. It's a stage, and it's broken down in the studies of Erik Erikson's model, that talks about a child from that age actually leaves home, starts to become more independent. They start to do things that are more independently done outside of the house, because they want to start to create their own identity. When that happens, parents are not going to be happy, I guarantee you, but there's going to be certain things that your child is going to do, is because they want to explore. It's part of exploring when they're kids. You know, if they're in a society, in a community where, you know, they're getting mixed messages from parents, from the community, it becomes very difficult. But they are going to try things, because that's the stage that they're confused. They want to get to know who they are, or how they will shape out to be for the remaining of their rest of their lives. So for that, parents also need to be very patient. That's kind of the factual scenario for parents too. So, and thank you for giving me the call. I appreciate the call. Very important questions. But deep inside, it's not just the appearance, but it's also what's on the inside, and how we raise our children in terms of whatever they have. You know, that's really the main core of it, and how much support the child gets from the family members. So I've got another question asked on Facebook as well, asking me why most teen and young live in very negative state and hard to change themselves. So teenagers are at a stage, just to connect it, at a stage where they're trying to learn to understand themselves. If a parent or a family does not support that teenager is going to rebel. Because for that teenager, this is what happens. And parents need to understand this too. This is a question that the sister actually discussed very importantly too. The child does not understand fully till they actually are sat down with, they're spoken with, because even at that point, when teenagers don't listen, or they tend to make things that are in negative, where it says like, why most teens and young people in very negative state and hard to change themselves, is the fact that they're in a stage where they're not going to be able to think that, religion is important right now. I'm going to think about religion. It doesn't work that way. You don't really gain that much of information, or you don't become that serious till you actually learn to understand, the process of life. Process of life really comes to effect as you get older in life. When you start getting older in life, you start to become, wiser. You start to make sense of life. Again, if you're a teenager, you're going to do things that are going to be very difficult. It's going to be very challenging for parents, because parents are going to have a hard time controlling their child. And again, for that, both parents need to be on the same page. If your child does something, again, you have to work with them, and you got to have patience, because life cannot just go or move forward the way you want it. You have somebody else in your life that will eventually, if not today, tomorrow, will make their own decisions. You just want to be there to help them understand that what is right and what is wrong. That's more important. And a lot of families that actually do make comments on their children, or are very hard on their children, are honestly those parents that actually are more in tune with shame, guilt, society, what people are going to say to us. That's where the children get affected with. A lot of families tend to lose that aspect of, again, religion gets broken here, and the cultural factor comes into play. So for that, it becomes very difficult for families. And for children, they start to have hardships. They start to dislike their own family members. They tend to have less conversations with their parents, with their fathers, with their mothers. When they come home, they'll just go to their rooms. On the weekends, they'll go out with their friends. They don't want to spend time with their parents. So those are common things that that I've seen, and common trends that are in the process of parents. The other thing we want to do, as brother and sister, is going back to going back to goal setting, and the importance of goal setting is that clarity in decision making. Goal setting helps you focus on what you want to do importantly, and not just that, but also it helps you in decision making later on in life. As you get older, you want to have effective decision making as you make certain goals, or you actually learn to adapt goals for yourself. And that's the important of life. You want to be able to make better decisions now, and you want to make, what you want to do is, as parents, is also help your children, set them up for success. Again, failures, it's okay. If they fail, they fail. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with failure. Life is about learning and falling and learning. It's the easiest thing in the world. But we have to be there to tell our kids, you know what, it's okay to fail. What I've gotten a lot also is from families who are actually well educated as well. Excuse me. First and foremost, let's talk about those that are actually from low socioeconomic status and families that are less educated. A lot of their kids actually fall into drugs, and they tend to do drugs. Because there's a pressure of food, work, when am I gonna be able to pay rent? But then there's those families who are well educated, and they also put a lot of pressure on their children. And the way they do that is that you have parents who are, let's say, master levels, doctorate levels, both parents. So the life that they live, or the work that they went through, they want the children to go through the same process. So what parents tend to lack, or they tend to not understand, is that they have a misunderstanding of their own children, is that your child is very different than how you are. Your child is very different from other siblings, from other brothers and sisters. One brother or sister might go ahead and become an educator. One brother or sister might become an engineer, but one of them might not be able to go to school. But then you constantly put that pressure from a very young age that, you know what, you also have to be able to, whatever happens, you need to finish your schooling. You have to have a master's degree, you have a PhD degree. That's great, that's your goals. A child's goal doesn't come into play until later in life. They have to start off simply, little by little, till they actually learn to understand. And for children, when you put that much pressure on them, when they do bad in school, they tend to hide things, or they'll think that, it's the end of the world, my parents are going to freak out, and eventually parents do freak out. They think that if my child fails a certain test, they're done, they're failures. No, they're not. They're actually not. Every person is gifted in their own way, in different ways. Just because you're highly educated, you go out in the field and do physical sport, you're probably the last person on the team. Nobody wants to pick you because you don't have the physical capacity to be able to play or join that group of elite, highly educated people in the genre or in the educational component of, let's say, of sports. Because that's also, sport is also a learning process. You have to keep developing yourself. That's how it is. Everybody's different. So we have to come to an understanding that we need to be very patient. That's what it is. You have to be patient and you have to be very calm with family and friends. Especially with your children, please. And now, before I go ahead and put on the last video, I have roughly 20 minutes left, but if you guys have more questions, please do give me a call or put it on Facebook. I will be more than happy to answer your questions. So going forward, and now let's talk about, things that gives you control for your future. Setting goals is also a way that helps you take control of your future as well. So whenever you set goals, you know what you're aiming at. Your aim is there. The only thing you need is the work that you have to put throughout the years. Sometimes you can go ahead and do things, you have short-term goals, you'll finish it very quickly and very easily. But long-term goals, they're unexpected too, so be patient, again, of failing. So if you are planning to, apply to a certain school and you do not get into that certain school, it's not the end of life. It will not be the end of life. The main thing for you is to keep trying and to keep moving forward in life. That is the main purpose of life. Anybody, you give a person, let's say if somebody had a learning disability where they were probably like 3 to 5 years slower in their mental health capacity versus somebody who just goes to med school, becomes a doctor or becomes an educator. The person who has mental health or learning disability or intellectual disability, who's, let's say, 3 to 5 years slower than that person who was a lot quicker, well, if not in 5 years, it will take them 10 to 20 years, but they will finish, they will complete. The main course and objective is the long-term plan, not the short-term plan. And again, the best thing to do is provide motivation. As family, friends, we need to constantly keep motivating our families, friends, children, because we want to give them hope. The moment they lose hope, they will be done. Hope is what keeps them and gives them everything. So please remember, hope is very important. You guys want to always give hope to your children, no matter what they do. So that's going to be it for today's show. It was a good show. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your sharing your thought processes. So I'm going to show you guys a video. It talks about it's called Praying for Success. So please take a look at it. I like to include certain Islamic videos to share with with the folks that are watching me. So that's in a way that also helps me kind of spread and kind of include certain ideas of what is success, or how to do things better with your children, how to work better with your children. So again, I will let you guys go for this week, brothers and sisters. Thank you for calling. Again, my shows are going to be in English because my focus is the youth, and my focus is on families, young families, and for those families that are living here, mainly in Europe, in America, to help you guys better work with your family members, with your children, in the community at all. So again, if you guys have any questions, please do let me know. But just for today, we are done. And as I had mentioned earlier, what I can do is I can make different series of discussion topics on how to work effectively with your children. I know this is a topic that a lot of parents want to discuss. This is actually probably my third or fourth talk, but I mean, I can see there's a lot of parents and folks that are watching the show that actually do enjoy this topic, because they want, they want some help, they want some solutions, they want to be able to know that this is a common thing. This is not just things that happen to your children only, but other children's or other families go through the same process of life. But you have to understand, every child is different, every family is different, every family situation is different, so we have to go very differently. To say that, again, now I just want to go ahead and just show you guys the last video of the goal setting of how it is. There's two videos actually, one by Dr. Zakir Naik and the second is by Ustad Noman Ali Khan. So I hope you guys have a great Sunday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.